Now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Ian Adair, Advanced CNP. Ian has spent his career building successful nonprofits. He is a 3-time nonprofit CEO, a TEDx speaker, and recognized expert in leadership, fundraising, and nonprofit management. Over his 25-plus-year career, he has raised tens of millions of dollars, managed dozens of boards and volunteer committees, and presented at more than 200 conferences and events around the world. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. It's incredible to be here. That was such an amazing panel. I almost feel guilty pulling people away from it to hear me speak, but I'm really honored to be here. Let me go ahead and share my slides just a little bit here. Again, thank you, Dorothy, and the entire team, everyone at the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance. I'm incredibly honored to be here this National CNP Day as your speaker, and even better that it's the Alliance's 75th anniversary. Before I begin, I also want to congratulate the whole NLA team for wrapping up another successful Elevate conference. It was a pleasure and an honor to be a part of it last year, and I've seen so many good things about the content and the speakers this year. Just to give everyone just a little bit more context about who I am, I've spent most of the past 10 years of my career in the diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging space, leading teams and organizations, advocating for equity in education and mental health awareness. I've had an incredible opportunity to lead 3 organizations, all with powerful missions that I felt very much connected to. Today, I'm at AFP Global, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and I spend my time developing programs and creating spaces for fundraising professionals to learn leadership skill sets like self-awareness, culture building, communication, and learning agility that we believe will help them become more authentic leaders, rooted in their own core values and strengths. Since this is National CNP Day, I want to dedicate my presentation today to all the amazing certified nonprofit professionals, my CNP and ACNP family, who are on the front lines of our sector every day. I want to recognize you for your work and say thank you. Your voice helps elevate stories of inequity and social justice. Your actions helps your efforts inspire and drive a culture of philanthropy in our sector, and your actions help save lives every day. This presentation is for you. So let's get started. The nonprofit sector today has just become so complex and so diverse and has so much impact on all the populations we serve. Organizations are changing, some faster than others, and the practice of leadership is starting to evolve to meet the needs of this changing workforce. The nonprofit sector is much larger than many realize, as the graphics will attest to. And I think this data speaks to the uniqueness and the complexity of our sector. According to the Center of Effective Philanthropy, 97% of nonprofits have budgets less than $5 million a year. 92% operate with less than $1 million, and 88% spend less than $500,000, $500,000 annually for their work, meaning a majority of the nonprofits are community-based, serving local needs. Knowing this data really highlights the need to focus on creating supportive and collaborative workspaces and the importance of taking care of our people. So if we look at the 3 biggest challenges nonprofit leaders face today, you talk about things like organizational culture, fundraising, board development, and management. But for most staff, of these 3, organizational culture has the most impact on them. The others are important and vital to the operation and governance of the organization, but the quality of the employee experience comes from the culture. To address these needs, I believe leaders today have to have the responsibility of being the culture caretakers within their organizations, meaning it's their responsibility to nurture the employee experience. Now, the word caretaker has never been referenced anything glamorous. Being a caretaker requires consistent, messy work, and it requires a lot of things. It requires recognizing bias, having hard conversations, a tremendous amount of learning and unlearning, and creating spaces where people feel safe to address concerns. To cultivate a culture of empathy, psychological safety, and wellness requires consistency, support, but most of all, action. The nonprofit sector is experiencing an unprecedented amount of lots of things. We read about these things all the time in blogs and on social media, and we hear about them in conferences. We know since the pandemic, there's been high employee turnover. We know morale and engagement has been low for many. We know executive leadership succession is at its highest right now in years. So as we continue to hear all these things, we also hear things like we're experiencing or we're going through a period of a great resignation. We hear about quiet quitting consistently, and there's no one, and no one wants to, and that no one wants to work anymore. Since the pandemic, employees have come back demanding too much. We know people just don't wake up one day and stop believing in their organization's mission, and we have what's happened is we've just become more hyper aware of our leadership. And if their actions don't match the values of the organization or our own, we make the decision to leave. We are in a position today to disrupt the status quo and make real change to create meaningful workspaces we know our workforce wants. We're in a state of what I like to call the R words, which where a lot of our strategy is based around how we reuse, recycle, rethink, and reinvent and rebuild our organizations. Now, we know some principles of leadership are timeless, but we also need to update our thinking on what makes great leaders in the 2020s and what will make them great rebuilders to address our current and future challenges. Now, there's a lot of goals that we have for today, and hopefully we'll hit them all. But I want to make sure that everyone understands that this presentation is about how we cultivate and promote more meaningful and purposeful workspaces for our professionals at all levels. Nonprofit leaders have the power to support our employees with dignity and empathy. And my favorite thing to say, no matter where I speak or how many people I speak to, is that leadership today is about taking care of the people responsible for the work, not just the work itself. I know our audience today is made up of professionals at different stages of their leadership journey. I feel it's nature of our sector to think about how we can be the next leader, and we don't spend enough time on how we can be the most impactful leader. As the adrenaline of the pandemic has started to subside, I continue to remind leaders that the epidemic within the pandemic is how are we going to take better care of our people? And that goes back to some of the things I hope we get out of today's presentation, just strategies to learn how to meet the needs of today's workforce and steps to increase job satisfaction and employee retention. So we've been waiting for it for so long to get to this point, and we're here. We're being human is now in demand, what we want of our leaders and our managers. So something that was not considered a strong leadership style before, not that long ago, is now in high demand. So when we look at terms like human-centered culture and kindness and empathy, vulnerability in leadership and psychological safety, we have to better understand these terms and what it is that people want in our organizations. So human-centered culture really prioritizes the human element in our work, focusing on values and interpersonal relationships to drive success. Vulnerability in leadership, we hear this a lot, is all about embracing authenticity and openness and the courage to show up, even when there is risk of failure or criticism. Kindness and empathy, really is about prioritizing understanding and compassion in team interactions, leading to stronger bonds and effective collaboration. And psychological safety, this is probably the term we hear the most in the last few years, is creating an environment where team members feel safe to take risk, voice opinions, and ask questions, and be themselves without fear of any retribution. So how do we create belonging in the workforce? We know belonging is so important, and I kind of identified 6 areas that we can help really cultivate a culture of belonging in your organization. And we do these things because employees want their leaders and managers to show empathy, vulnerability, and concern. These actions we know build trust and loyalty within teams. We know this because study after study shares that a large percentage of our workforce are leaving organizations because of toxic work environment and poor relationships with their managers, and taking lower paying positions because of the desire to be in a more supportive work culture and for more improved mental health and wellness. This is why it's so important to build a sense of belonging in our work each and every day. So what are some of the elements of belonging? We hear this term all the time, and we have to make sure that when we start to work on what belonging is in the workplace, we're working on the things that we know are going to make the most impact. So being aligned, being seen and connected, and feeling supported. All employees want to feel like they belong. Belonging is a key component of inclusion as well. When employees are truly included, they perceive the organization cares about them as individuals, and meaning also that cares about their authentic selves. Belonging improves lots of things, just employee engagement, morale, and also employee relationship building. And if that wasn't enough, creating a sense of belonging has been shown to have incredible results on greater job effort and high performance with employees. So going from belonging, the next thing we want to really focus on is empathy in the workplace. We've been hearing about the importance of empathy for years, and that we know that workforces want their managers to be able to show empathy. But we've also know that managers for so long and leaders for so long were told that that displaying empathy was not a part of an effective leadership style. So what is it? Empathy is being able to understand the emotions and the needs of others. It's putting yourself in their shoes. Toxic work cultures lack empathy. And when we lack empathy, people are left feeling unappreciated and unvalued. In contrast, when we have empathy, we react more compassionately and have a deeper understanding of how someone feels. Empathy is a powerful tool in the workplace because it can foster a positive work culture, while at the same time ensure individuals feel respected, appreciated, and included, all of which are key elements for any thriving organization. I get asked all the time, how do we increase employee engagement? The simple answer is show that you care. It doesn't cost much to show employees that you generally care, but it can make the biggest difference in keeping them loyal, happy, productive, and engaged. So building a culture of empathy requires you to be proactive. And how do we be proactive? And I've really narrowed it down to these 5 things. Empathy is being concerned about the human being, not just their output. An empathetic leader is one who has genuine interest in the team members' lives and the challenges they face and their overall feelings. I'm a big believer in sharing stories of lived experience. I believe it's one of the most powerful communication methods a leader can deploy, because when leaders are vulnerable and share their experiences, it helps foster the acceptance and foster transparency at work. So we got to ask questions. We got to get to know everybody. We need to understand that it's a strong practice to make people feel bigger than they are. And I think leaders need to understand they have to role model what empathy looks like in that behavior, and encourage people to talk about their feelings, because they're not going to talk about their feelings unless that leader or manager is a model of that behavior. So 4 ways we can build empathy in the workplace and really why it matters. And there's lots of ways we can do this, but I think the best way to start is understanding these 4 important foundational strategies of active listening, recognizing your own bias, work with your team, and to avoid making assumptions. active listening in a busy work environment. And I know we're all incredibly busy. It's easy to passively listen while your mind is on something else. Try to put your deadlines and your task aside to concentrate on what the other person is really saying. And I think the big part about active listening is really looking for nonverbal cues as well. This has become incredibly important as we kind of transition into hybrid work environments and virtual work environments, to really be able to see what your coworker is going through, as well as hearing what they're going through. Recognizing your bias, your unconscious bias could be making you react in a certain way, impacting your decision making. Although it's difficult to unlearn, it's easier to keep your bias in check when you're aware that it exists. Work with your team by better understanding your team's workload and their frustrations that they feel. You can empathize with their needs and worries. It's not a lot easier to spot the signs of burnout when you work alongside someone, but it helps prevent any kind of disengagement. Avoid making assumptions. Give an employees the benefit of the doubt before passing judgment on their performance can be a powerful way to demonstrate empathy. When somebody's going through something, sometimes we see their engagement in the work is different, and we need to understand what's going on behind that engagement and not just look at their productivity. And avoid making assumptions. The more leaders and the more that leaders and employees practice these skills in the workplace, the more cohesion there is in building that diverse and culture that we can all learn to enjoy. So to destigmatize failure and to demonstrate fallibility and humility and to respond productively are all key components of cultivating psychological safety at work. So we've moved from belonging to empathy, and now we're talking about psychological safety, the third component. And these are incredibly strong strategies to help cultivate psychological safety in the workplace. So let's talk about it. To destigmatize failure. What does that mean? To empathize the purpose of the organization and the team, and what is at stake. When we demonstrate fallibility, and those are just understanding and recognizing our flaws and humility, we're actively inviting others to contribute and ask open questions and listen and understand and not just respond. Respond productively can mean celebrating failure and learning from it and recognizing the effort that we made. Sometimes we only celebrate the wins. We need to also understand that we need to celebrate the work that went into a project for people to understand that we valued their time and their work, and that it just wasn't our turn this time around, but there's a lot we can learn about what we went through together. Questions to intentionally support a culture of psychological safety. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because I think psychological safety and creating a culture of psychological safety leads to so many things that I know the employees in the workforce and the nonprofit sector really, really want. Leaders must create supportive working environments. We know that, but we have to know why we need to do it, because staff and volunteers need to feel safe and respected, listened to. They need to feel secure and taking appropriate risk and asking questions without fear of being dismissed or punished. When we speak about psychological safety, we speak to our ability to feel safe and being vulnerable. Vulnerability means that you can create an environment where someone feels safe enough to raise their hand and ask a question and say they don't know what's going on, or they need help. And so we have to learn and take the time to train ourselves to do the things we need to do to create that environment of psychological safety. Now, these 6 questions are a really great place to start in making sure that that culture is being cultivated within your organization. And then I love this graphic because there's a lot on what psychological safety is, but there's not a lot on what psychological safety isn't. And comparing the two are incredibly powerful to better understand and definitely understand how to go about this. So going from psychological safety into recognition is so important, because all four of these things that we've talked about, whether it's belonging or empathy, psychological safety, now recognition, are incredibly powerful to create the kind of work environment that we know our staffs want. One of the best ways to influence your staff or team is through expressing gratitude through staff recognition. This is how you can drive productivity, employee retention, morale, and engagement. Leaders can empower employees through gratitude by instilling in them a sense of belonging and competence, which can lead to the employee feeling greater confidence in their individual ability and the overall ability of the organization to make a greater impact. One of my favorite book recommendations of all time is by David Novak, and his 10 guiding principles for motivating and recognizing employees. And it really is a must read, because there's so much power in recognizing employees, and we can really do it for low cost and no cost within our organizations. And it's incredibly appreciated by our workforce. So it's making sure we hit a couple of those important things, like focusing on people, not just performance. Things that are unique to you and your team. Be specific and timely about it. I know there's a lot of traditional employee programs out there, recognition programs, that they only recognize employees certain times of the year. I think we need to do it when we see something good. We need to be able to do it immediately. Any tool that enables an organization to hold on to its best people or volunteers is a good thing, and recognition is a powerful tool. And when we look at some of the key components of recognition, again, we're looking at the things that we know the research tells us is most valued by our workforce. So as long as it's authentic and personalized, it's equitably distributed, we see that all teams are having opportunities to be recognized. I've been in organizations with more traditional recognition programs, like an Employee of the Month program. But when you have an organization of 300, 400, 600 employees, recognizing only 12 people a year, you might not be really reaching everyone who's doing an outstanding job on their team or in their department. So you really have to look at what can we do to individualize this to make sure that everyone's being recognized for their works and their contributions to the organization. So how do we cultivate and promote more meaningful and purposeful workspaces for our professionals? And how do we make that transition from task-oriented work to approach where it's more people-centered? And I think this is a great graphic that has them side by side. It does it really well. We know our workforce is shifting in the direction of our people, and they're ready for this to happen. We also do this because there's competition in our sector to hire and keep the best people. It is a leader's number one job, as many of us know. And I tell people all the time, the number two job is not to remember what the number one job is, because we want to keep our best people. This is one of the harshest facts, I think, in any leader's professional life. I know every time I've lost a really good employee, I've always been left with that feeling of what could I have done more or better to keep them in the organization. We have to remember, in the search for the best people, or what we consider the best people for our organizations, which shows up every day, are human beings. So moving towards a more people-centered approach takes all this into consideration, so we create the best environment to want to recruit the best people. I really love this quote by Richard Branson. I think it encapsulates what leadership should be about. Train people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so that they don't want to. I know that's a fear in the nonprofit sector. We fear overtraining people because they might leave us, but we also have to know that if we treat them the best, because of what people are asking for today, they will want to stay. Leaders today have the responsibility to look after their people, and that requires two very important things: continuing education and a willingness to leave their comfort zones. Now, when I say this to any group of leaders, the reception I get is not usually that warm. But why is it so important? Because we can't keep pushing the notion in the nonprofit sector that we have to give so much of ourselves until there is nothing left mentally or emotionally, and we burn out. Mission statements do not create impact in our communities. People do, and it's time we take care of them. So in going through and looking at maybe some traditional leadership styles, we just weren't trained to be able to do this. We were conditioned to be more autocratic. We were conditioned to be more top-down leadership style. We have to know this is not what our workforce wants. Today's workforce is asking for way more than what we used to ask for when I was coming up in the nonprofit sector. And they're asking for things more than just salary and title. They want a positive work culture. They want access to the latest technology. They want a flexible work schedule, the number one thing asked for since the pandemic. They want professional development and mentoring, and they really want their organizations to care about their mental health and wellness. Now, check out this list. Do you agree with it? Are there things on there that you're also seeing that you would like to have in your organization? I think a career in nonprofit really is a journey to embrace the messy and the chaotic and the uncertain and beautiful world. And that is why that is why all these things are so important. That's why we know these are the things that we need to create to have the right work environment to attract people who want to feel engaged and feel like they belong in our organizations. We have to continue to remember that leadership today is about taking care of the people doing the work and not just the work itself. So the employee experience is really kind of wrapped up in this equation of what we talked about culture, and we've talked about the need for technology and what that physical space look like. All these things make up what we're trying to create in the workplace. All these things we have discussed, like belonging, empathy, psychological safety, and recognition, all enhance the employee experience. I just ask that no matter where you are on your leadership journey, you lead with kindness. So I want to end with a short poem by Ronnie Kinsey entitled Kindness is Power, as we go through our last couple of slides. And it goes like this: lead with heart, in every email a chance to uplift, in every meeting a space for empathy. Lead with it. Each small gesture plants seeds of change, a listening ear, a word of encouragement. Grow it. It turns workplaces into havens, challenges into opportunities for connection. Feel its impact. Your kindness can transform a colleague's day, a team's spirit, a career's trajectory. Be the catalyst. I'm really a big fan of those words. I'm a big fan of the employee experience, and it's great for managers to kind of look at a graphic like this to see where they can probably improve or better support their staff. And it's a great thing. It's a great reference tool as we look to where we can instill more belonging, empathy, psychological safety, and recognition in each and every day for our employees. In closing, I want to offer some parting advice. It's been an incredible opportunity to be here today. So to everyone out there listening, I'd say find fulfillment in the process of your everyday work. Laugh at the ridiculous, navigate the stupidity, and enjoy the climb way more than the view from the top, because you will have way more climbs than views in your career. So enjoy those moments and find meaning in them. Finally, we have to remember that the best resource we have as nonprofit professionals is each other. And for that, I want to thank the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance for continuing to create safe spaces to have these discussions and offering communities of support for CNPs and ACNPs to gather and learn from one another and grow as professionals. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here on National CNP Day. It's been my honor and my pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to be in front of you.
Thank you, Ian, for your time and for sharing this message. So much for us to think about and to put into practice. And don't forget to take your slides down, Ian. Thank you. What a wonderful message. We'll be sending out the video of today's event to everyone who attended and registered. And hopefully we'll be able to do something about that sound issue when we do that. Thank you all for joining the National CNP Day celebration today. By attending, you were entered into a drawing for merchandise from our online store. The winner will be contacted early next week, so keep your fingers crossed. Thank you to our CNPs for the work you do every day. The Nonprofit Leadership Alliance is here to continue to support you. Watch your email and check CNP Central for events coming up that you can participate in. We hope you will stay in touch, and this list provides a few ideas. Every CNP has access to CNP Central. Here you can find resources and have conversations. It's also a place you can keep us updated on your work and your life. You can access CNP Central from our website. If you haven't already, you can earn your advanced CNP to demonstrate your commitment to the nonprofit sector. You can learn more about this renewable credential and all of our program on our website, or you can reach out to me personally. Continue to build a strong social sector by referring a colleague or friend to earn the CNP. Consider being a volunteer with the Association of CNPs. This group of volunteers does a lot of work in planning our programming and thinking about ways to build connections between our network of CNPs. If you can, we hope you'll donate to support the future of the nonprofit sector by supporting NLA. And most importantly, continue to do good in your work and in your communities. Thank you again for joining today. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. And one more time, happy National CNP Day, everyone.